This day and this session are going to be about meditation, mindfulness, how and why to practice techniques, strategies, all of the stuff that we do as we sit down in this building and as we move about the rest of our day here. How do we practice and why do we practice? And it may seem natural, obvious, reasonable to you that this would come at the beginning of a week like this. Imagine you talk about meditation first, and then we go through the rest of the week and we learn the other pieces. This may seem reasonable, natural, obvious, or maybe not. But in a certain sense, it's actually quite surprising. And it's a little bit strange, historically speaking, to do it this way. The Buddha did not do it this way. The Buddha did not start by telling people how to meditate. In his system of training, meditation was really more of an effect than a cause. It was more of a later part of the path that began in a different way with changing our behavior, our ethics, actually shifting our lives. But that's okay. This is a good way to do it. It's a good way to starting by talking about meditation for many reasons, one of which is that you will get that soon enough in either case. It doesn't really matter all that much which way you start, because in the Buddha's system, in the original texts, the founding texts of Buddhism, it's made clear that in order to practice, in order to meditate, you must bring about behavior change. You must behave in ethical, skillful, upright ways. So, good news, to the extent that you've done that, you can meditate, and to the extent that you haven't done that, still good news, you can sit here and have that clarified. Try to meditate, and then find out that it isn't working so well, which can give motivation for changing our lives. So, why do we meditate? Why practice? What's the reason? Why do we come into this building? Why at this place of training do we place such an emphasis on this building, the Zendo, place of meditation? Why don't we just have that hall over there and do everything in that and, maybe do coaching? Why don't we just do coaching and therapy all day long? Why do we practice? Why do we meditate? You can ask anyone here that question, and it's likely that they will give you an answer. You can ask 10 different people that question, and it's likely that they will give you 10 different answers. You may even be able to ask one person who trains here that question, and they will be able to give you 10 different answers. And you should just know that in evaluating those answers, the most impressive sounding of the answers that you hear may not be the most impressive of the answers that you hear. So someone can say, I practice in order to realize my vow. It sounds an impressive answer. I practice meditation in order to realize the true purpose of my life. That's very impressive sounding. And if they're doing that, to the extent that they're doing that, then that's a really impressive answer. But someone else may say, I practice because I found out after a long time, many years, that if I do the technique, I suffer a little bit less. And that is a really impressive answer. Mostly because it's real. The thing that's impressive about that answer is that it's true. It's a real answer. It's not that they've taken on a framework and system and intellectualized it, and they're giving you what that framework says. So, why do we practice? We practice so that we can realize our vow. That's my answer. And the answer that I'm going to offer now. We practice so that we can actually live a life that we are not ashamed of. Where we can actually give life to what actually matters to us. This is something that I struggled with for a long time. One of these intellectual people, I wanted to do good, to live my true purpose. And for many years, I would come into places like this, or I would go into other sacred ceremonies and places, and I would ask, how do I live my vow? Except I wouldn't phrase it like that. I would say, what startup idea should I found? What kind of company should I make? Based on what idea? What way of conceiving? What way of creating a dream world should I become attached to and live my life according to? And I have a sense that when we hear a word like vow, or when we hear find and realize and live your true purpose, or things like that, we often go in that direction. We often have a sense that my vow is something that I'm going to realize in my head. I'm going to come up with the idea that is what I should do with my life, and then everything will be okay from that point on, because I'll just do that idea and the world will follow. I'll make the world into my idea, and then I'll be happy and everyone else will be happy too. Well, we meditate in order to realize a vow that is not an idea. We come into this room and sit in order to see that we, through our continual attachment to ideas, are constantly missing what is happening right now. That whole direction, that direction of coming up with an idea, attaching to it, and then trying to make the world into that idea, is missing the point. Is missing the point of our lives, missing the point of this moment. This is maybe the central claim of Buddhism. The central claim, the big thing that the Buddha said, in my opinion, in my view, in my idea, is that ignorance has a cause. Ignorance, lack of clarity, lack of ability to live our vow, has a cause. It is something that is caused. It is something that is created, is constructed. You can feed that cause and then you will have more ignorance. You feed the cause of ignorance and you'll have more ignorance. And if you stop feeding that cause, if you stop feeding the cause of ignorance, then you will stop having ignorance. We'll come to a point of being able to clearly live your vow. And the Buddha clarifies this by saying that ignorance is fed in particular by what are called the Five Hindrances, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a little bit. And these Five Hindrances are in turn fed by unethical behavior, by wrong action in terms of thought, speech, and body. That we behave in ways that are damaging to ourselves and others, and because of that we experience these Five Hindrances that obstruct our own clarity, our own wisdom, make it harder to practice, harder to get anywhere in terms of what we do as we sit. And these Five Hindrances in turn produce and continue our state of ignorance regarding the purpose of our lives. Furthermore, true knowledge and liberation also has a cause. The Buddha also says this, that awakening, that enlightenment, that liberation, that complete response to the question of our lives has a cause. It has a, not really, well, maybe not a cause, but let's say nutriment. You can feed it. There is a way that you can reinforce and feed and support that, support liberation. And how is liberation fed? It's fed by something that's called the awakening factors, which I won't get into right now, or today, which in turn is fed by the four foundations of mindfulness, which we'll talk about a little bit more tonight and maybe later today, which in turn is fed by right action, skillful action, meritorious action. It's fed by thought, speech, or relationship, and bodily movement, physical actions that we take that are skillful, beneficial, kind, caring. And so we'll learn more about that, about right action, about ethics throughout the remainder of this week, throughout the remainder of your time training here. But the main point I want to make with all of this is just that this is the way in which the two aspects of this training, what we call awakening and what we call responsibility, are integrated. That we find that in order to change our mind, in order to actually change our mind, in order to actually realize freedom from ignorance, liberation, we have to change our behavior. In order to awaken to a fresh, clear, new, vibrant, authentic, true mind, we have to change our behavior. We actually have to change the way that we live our lives. Changing our behavior, we find that our mind just naturally changes. When we actually shift the way that we live, the way that we act, the way that we relate, the way that we think about ourselves and others, when we actually shift this, we find that the mind that is doing all of that also changes. We find that our mind just naturally follows our action. And then with this mind, we find that we can behave in even more skillful ways. We bring forth still greater competence in these domains, the domains of our life. We connect more deeply with other people. We realize more deeply the purpose of our lives. We bring that into action more effortlessly and more skillfully. And based on that, we are able to come to an even clearer state of mind. And this loop, this feedback loop between awakening and responsibility, is the point, is the goal, it's the purpose of this training. It's the reason that this place of training was built. Anything you'd say about that?
Sounds good.
So, in terms of meditation practice, you could say that there are three different levels of what you might call training, or pedagogy in a very broad sense of the word, or practice. Three different levels. And the first of these levels is what we are doing right now, what you are doing right now, and what I'm attempting to help you with right now, which is that we learn about practice. Learn frameworks, techniques, skills, ways of thinking about the practice, ways of doing the practice, ways of categorizing the practice. You learn the knowledge, the intellectual understanding that's required to walk the path. Or at least, maybe not required, but very helpful in walking the path. This, you could say, is the first level of training. You come to a talk like this and someone says some things about what the practice is, and you consider that, and you, out of faith, maybe in that person or maybe in your own clarity of mind, put that into practice and find out if it works or not. This, then, is the second level. It's the second level of training, which is that you actually do it. You may also be doing that right now. You may, at this moment, at this time, be implementing some kind of meditation technique. If you're not, you are invited to, encouraged to. If you're in Dragon, required to. So Dragon is practicing technique right now, and everyone else, if you would like to, you're welcome to, if you like. No pressure. Start doing a meditation technique. Right now, you can focus on your breath. You can focus on the words I'm saying. You can focus on your emotional body sensations. Or you can just do nothing and let it all come and go freely. But in any case, the invitation is there to do this practice. And that is this second layer. So the first layer is you understand what is the practice, how do I do it. Second layer is you actually practice it. You actually learn how to do the technique. Actually learn how to bring your attention to your breath, how to keep your attention on your breath. You learn how to respond to various circumstances that arise. You learn what to do when a distraction comes up. You learn what to do when you have energy. You learn what to do when you don't have energy. You go through all of this stuff. And based on this, you become competent in the skill of mindfulness, of meditation, of practice. And the third layer then, these are increasingly real, let's say. The third layer, the first is that you understand intellectually how to do it. The second is that you actually practice doing it. The third layer of this practice is that you become truly desperate. You come to a point where you realize that this just has to happen now. Maybe someone says something to you. Someone says something to you and you actually hear it. Maybe you actually hear what they actually said. A lot of people say a lot of things to each other, and a lot of the time what we're actually saying to each other is the question of our life. So someone says that, someone asks you the question of your life. Someone you love maybe, someone you train with, someone you care about, or someone you don't even know comes up to you and asks you a question that you realize in that moment you need to answer. You have to answer that question in order to be of service to them. Realize that you have to have an answer to that question, and you don't. You actually hear the question that they're asking. You actually hear the question of your life. Based on that, based on realizing that that is a real question that they just asked you and you really don't have the answer, you may enter into a state of real desperation. This desperation is the place in which those other two layers of practice make sense. The desperation is the place in which the understanding of frameworks, approaches to practice makes sense. It's where all of the work, all of the understanding, all of the practice, all of the adjustment of your posture, all of the purification of the hindrances, whatever it is that you're doing in practice, it's the place where that finally makes sense. The desperation, the place where we finally need something to work. Realize that we actually need something to work and have a level of maturity at which we are able to throw away everything that doesn't work. It doesn't usually feel like it in the moment, but this stage, this third stage, is the place, the time in which we are most mature. It's the place in which our practice is most mature. The place in which we are completely hopeless, completely helpless, completely incompetent, without anything to turn to within us or outside of us. This is the place when we are at our most mature in terms of the practice. That doesn't mean that the other two layers are wrong and this is right. You shouldn't see it in that way. It isn't that this desperation is correct and the intellectual understanding and the practicing of techniques is wrong or is incorrect. It isn't like that at all. We need those other two layers. We need those other two levels. They form the basis, they form the foundation for this search, for this to come to life. It's sort of like if you can imagine that you have a house, let's say, and you need to do some work on the house. To construct the house, let's say, maybe it's like a zendo. We had to build the zendo. In order to build the zendo, you had to build more than the zendo. So maybe to make the metaphor feel better to me, I'm going to say let's say you have a house or a building, and you need to tear the building down. You're going to take the building apart. You're going to tear the building down. First, you have to build scaffolding around the building. So first, before that, you have to actually plan, understand, study, write up blueprints, figure out everything that you're going to do. Next, you have to build scaffolding around the building. You have blueprints of this first layer that you understand what you're doing. Second layer, you're building the scaffolding. This is actually more building. You have more house now than you did when you started. It may seem as though you're going in the wrong direction, you're completely failing at unbuilding the house. Even more house to take down, but it actually, believe it or not, helps. Maybe you build up the scaffolding, you practice taking the window out and put it back in, practice taking the roof off and put it back on. Yes, doing the practice, experimenting, exploring, and then finally you reach a point when you can start to actually take apart the house. That is the goal. That's the hope. That's my hope for you, is that you receive in this session today and in your time training here what you need and what will aid you in whenever that point comes in your life, maybe today or maybe 10 years from now, you realize that it's time now. I hope that this will be of service to you at that point when you realize that you actually have to take apart your house. When you come to the point of wanting to do that, of actually wanting to do that, I hope that this will serve you in that. I am very ignorant of the Zen tradition. I'm definitely, it's sort of like, I wouldn't say that I'm not a Zen teacher, because that, it's like I'm not a, heavyweight boxing champion. You can look at me and it's just that, I don't need to begin talking about boxing by saying that I'm not a heavyweight boxing champion. So in the same way, I don't feel like I really need to say I don't teach Zen, but I don't teach Zen. I'm not a Zen teacher, I don't understand Zen. I have practiced Zen for 3 weeks of my life, badly, incompetently, and all of the rest of my training has been in this system, which is not Zen at all. But I do find a great deal of inspiration in the stories of Zen. The stories of the people who have trained and given their lives to Zen, in the same way I find inspiration in the stories of people who've given their lives to Christianity, who've given their lives to various other spiritual traditions in the world. And so I would just share a story that I'm very inspired by about this level of desperation, about the level of desperation that I'm attempting to refer to here. So, at one time there was a certain Zen student by the name of Xiangyan. Anyone know Xiangyan? Okay. Who was very good at those first 2 levels of the training. He was very accomplished, very skilled in terms of understanding, in terms of knowing why and how to practice, knowing what the sutras, the scriptures are referring to, and was able to answer people's questions. If someone asked him a question, he would be able to give 10 different answers to that question. He would say, well, you can see it this way, or you can see it that way, or you can see it this other way, and these ways actually intersect and support each other in these ways and cancel each other's blind spots in those ways. Very impressive person. Kind of like I'm not going to name names, but you know the type. There are those in our world today who are very skilled in that manner, in that way, who can give many different answers, maybe write very impressive books. We read the books, and the books give us a lot of frameworks and feel very fun and exciting to read. He was kind of one of those sorts of people. And at one point in his training, his master, Guishan, I don't really know, I'm bad at Chinese, but someone's nodding, so you know what I'm talking about, or at least could, if you've heard about them before. His master Guishan said to him, you are very smart. You are very skilled at this practice. You are very skilled at understanding how this works, understanding what to say. People ask you a question, you can give 10 different answers, but there's something beyond that, So I want you to tell me. I'd like you to tell me right now. And the question that he asks is typically given, of course it isn't exactly like this, but it's sort of poetic. It's poetically given in this way as, what was your original face? Who were you? What did you look like before your mother and father met? Where were you before you were born? Who were you before you were conceived? What was happening then? I was asking him a question that, of course, for many of us just sounds obviously fake. We're very well-trained materialists in this culture, and so we know. There's nothing before birth. There's just atoms and molecules, and some of those come together, the chemicals kind of react, and then there's an embryo, and that becomes a fetus, and then that's born, and then you have a kind of a proto-person, and then that becomes a person. And then they die, and then nothing else happens. Yes, we know. That's not a real question. That's not referring to anything. But at that time, for this person, for Xiangyan, he was in a state of mind, he was in a position to realize that, actually, no, that's a real question. That is a real question. The Master has just asked me a real question. He wasn't as brainwashed as we are by materialism. He wasn't as deluded as we are in these baseless assumptions about life and death and the nature of reality, nature of experience. Didn't have all of that. It had kind of been rubbed down by years of struggling and training. And so we could actually hear, oh, that's a question. And I need to have the answer to the question. And I don't have the answer to that question. And so we kind of mumbled something intellectual, equation. Well, okay, no, kind of ignored him. He said, okay, well, you answer it. Can you answer the question? Can you tell me the answer to that question? And Kuei-shan said, no. I'm not going to do that. Because that would just be my understanding. That doesn't help you at all. There's no benefit whatsoever to me answering that question for you. In fact, you would get mad at me later if I did. So, Yang Yan went back to his room, grabbed all of his books, read through all of the books, picked up the Ken Wilber book, and he read through the Ken Wilber book, and he learned about the 5 different dimensions of awakening, and how you... Actually, it's you grow up and... What is it? What do you do?
Clean up, wake up, show up.
Yeah, clean up, wake up, show up, grow up. And then there's a 5th one? I don't know, anyway, you read that book, okay, no answer there. Put it down, picked up the Wingram book, okay. Mastering the core teachings of Buddha, here we go. Yeah! And then he's like really jazzed about Buddhism, but wait, no, that's not the answer to the question either. Picked up a different book by a different person. Ah, yes, heart. It's actually all about the heart. I've been really crazy about my mind the whole time. It's actually, wait, no, I don't have the answer to that question still. Put that book down, picked up another book, picked up another book, picked up another book. None of the books had any answer to the question. And so, demonstrating his maturity, he said, well, you can't eat a picture of a cake. And so he went off in search. He tried again and again, poked the master this way and that, tried to get the answer, threatened to hit the master, physically attack and hurt the master unless the master answered the question. The master refused, so he did in fact hit the master. And on doing this, he became completely hopeless, completely desperate, realized that this was unacceptable. What he'd done, he'd just been violent to his own master. This was unacceptable. And so he left. He actually left the training. He began a pilgrimage. Just wandered around, realized that this is the only thing that matters. He burned all of his texts, threw them all away, and just started walking around the world. Until at one point, he came upon the grave site of a certain great teacher in Zen, and decided, maybe I can do this. I can't help anyone. I can't do anything of any use to anybody, but maybe I can tend to this master's gravesite. Clean it up, look after it, live here. Maybe that's probably what I can do that. That's something I can do. And so we did that. We just led this very simple life of sweeping off the dust and dirt and rocks that would accumulate on the tomb, tended to the plants, to the trees. Led this very simple life as his knowledge, understanding gradually faded into the background. His mind gradually became quieter and quieter. All of the ways that he had of understanding just kind of relaxed. And then one day he was sweeping his gravesite of his master, and he swept, he hit a little pebble, a tiny little rock, and the rock bounced, rolled down the hill, and it hit a piece of bamboo. In that moment of that pebble hitting that piece of bamboo, he actually heard that sound. Heard that sound without anything obstructing it. And in that moment, awakened. In that moment, became able to answer that question. In that moment, came to a position of direct authority on that question. In describing his awakening, he said a verse, "Last year's poverty was not true poverty. This year, even the wind can get through." So, here we are. Here to acquire a framework for practice. Or maybe someday we can have our life wrecked and come to the point when we can actually feel the wind move through. So in this system of training, we use a particular method, we use a particular framework for teaching this practice, organizing the practice. It's a good framework. It's one that I've made extensive use of in my training and still use on a daily basis. And so I strongly recommend that you internalize it, study it, take it on, and practice it. And the framework is called the Forall Method. It's called that just because Forall grudgingly acknowledged that people would call it that anyway, and decided to just cut to the chase. It's something that he made up while he was on a solo retreat and having a hard time concentrating. So, the Forall Method is organized in terms of steps. And the first step is actually called Step 0. Step 0 is what in Buddhism is referred to as right action, as right thought, right speech, and right action, and in fact, right livelihood. Step 0 is that we ask the question, how do I live my vow? Or doctrinally, if we want the version that's printed in the books, how do I give my body, mind, and life completely to great love for the benefit of all beings? And we ask that question. And in Step 0, we simply live the answer that we have right now. We implement in our lives the answer to that question that we already know. So for example, we already know. We already have a sense of the answer to this question today. We know, is the answer to this question to kill people? No. So I'm not going to kill people. I'm going to go about my day and I'm not going to kill people today. We may have greater clarity than that. We know what seems skillful, what seems unskillful, and so we do what's skillful and we work to change our behavior so we don't do what's unskillful. This is all step 0. And step 0 is sort of what brings this to life. It's what makes this real. It's what makes it not just an intellectual exercise of self-satisfaction and gaining some kind of intellectual understanding of what this refers to, but actually brings it to life. Now we align our behavior in step 0. We align our lives in step 0. We change how we make money, for example, so that it's done in a more ethical way. How we live our lives, so it's less damaging to ourselves and others, more wholesome. And then, having done that, we enter what is called in that method step 1. In step 1, we prepare to meditate. We prepare to practice. Step 1 is that we align our body and breath. So we establish a body and a way of breathing that is supportive of doing meditation practice. We learn how to do this, how to align our body and breathing, and then furthermore, we make use of this to purify the 5 hindrances. I mentioned the 5 hindrances earlier. In step 1, we actually work through those hindrances. So what are the 5 hindrances? Very briefly, well, no. First, let's give an outline and then I'll go into it. We purify the 5 hindrances, which I still won't tell you about, and we give rise to an appropriate state of mind. We give rise to heroic motivations for doing the practice. After that, we meditate. This is step 2. Everything that Shinzen Young teaches in terms of meditation is step 2. Everything that Culadasa teaches in terms of meditation is step 2. All of the various techniques and frameworks and strategies of how to attend to a focus space, what to do there, that's all step 2. And from there, and we'll go into step 2 more this evening. So for now, just focus on your breath. That's step 2. Unless you have something else, you do that instead. But by default, focus on your breath. And next, we enter upon and abide in increasingly powerful, wholesome, beneficial, healing, wholesome as in it brings together our various disparate parts, it resolves the tensions in our relationships within ourselves. We enter and abide in these states of mind, and really more like states of body and mind, states of heart and states of mind, which in the classical texts are referred to as Samadhi or jhanas. We practice being in those more and more fully and for longer and longer amounts of time. And these states of mind, and that's step 3 through 6. That's all step 3 through 6. And step 7 then is just that we answer the question. We make use of the mind and body and wholesomeness that we've cultivated, make use of everything in our entire lives to actually realize, actually fulfill our vow, actually do what the whole world is asking us to do, actually do what we ourselves in our own hearts are asking ourselves to do. So, any questions on any of that so far? Oh, that's clear. Okay, great. Well, we'll give just a little bit more overview of step 1, which we'll mainly be working with today, this morning anyway, this session. So in step 1, we make use of our body. We start with our body for a number of different reasons, one of which is that we, in this culture and this species, we have an unusual propensity for living in a dream world, living in our heads, acting from our heads, and so we try to just immediately get off on the right foot by starting with our body. And in fact, starting with the part of our body that is farthest away from our head. So we have 5 points of posture that are emphasized in terms of the Forall Method. The first of these is that we tend to and work with our base. Part of us that is in contact with the ground or the floor, our legs, our lower body. And we ensure that this base is stable. It's firmly, solidly, stably connected to the earth. It's like a boulder that's sunk halfway into the ground. You can explore sitting in many different ways and find out how to sit with a stable base. It's well worth spending a lot of time on this. If you spend 100 hours just exploring, if I sit with this way, is it more stable or less stable? What about this way? What about this way? What if I use a cushion here? What if I stand up? What if I sit in a different posture? What if I cross my legs in a different order? You spend 100 hours doing that, then that is time well spent. That's good practice. You're doing good practice then, and you should do that practice. So it's worth really investigating that, really finding out how can I sit with a stable base. Full lotus is, of course, the easiest position in which to have a stable base, but it isn't always the easiest position for postural reasons, body reasons. We all have different bodies, and it's not a good or better posture or something like that. So you, in your own way, can explore how can I sit in a way that is appropriate for my body, that doesn't hurt, that doesn't strain my body, and yet that leads to a stable base. That's the first point of posture. Second point is in our sacrum, our tailbone. And with this point, we root our tailbone into that base. So you're welcome to do this right now if you like. You can try changing posture. So sitting with a stable base, you're welcome to shift around as you need to, even stand up, sit back down. You then root your tailbone into that base so that your spine is growing up out of that base like a tree, supported by the earth, supported by your base, growing up towards the sky. And in particular, you want to ensure that your tailbone isn't too far forward or back. A lot of the time it's the case that we sit with our tailbone kind of like collapsed too far, like sort of concave, or it's convex, we kind of slouch down. We want to find a way of sitting that is neither of those two things. We want to sort of go too far in one direction and the other, and then find that middle place where it isn't too far forward or back, and our spine has a healthy, natural curve to it. We then move into the center of our body, our core, our belly, our abdomen, and we ensure that this is balanced, that the center of our body is in our center of gravity. So we're not leaning to the right, or to the left, or to the front, or to the back. And even if you want, you're not twisted to one side or the other. You can spend, again, many hours, many tens of hours, many hundreds of hours exploring this and still find new ways in which to sit with a centered body, or to sit so that the center of your body is centered. Then you move up to the fourth point, which is in your heart, your solar plexus. In this, you want to be open. So open means typically, for us, we Westerners tend to sit with a collapsed and sunken heart. We counteract that by moving our solar plexus, our heart, up and forward in space. But you also don't want your back to be closed. You want your whole heart to be open. And so it may be different for different people. You have to explore this. Autumn, anything you'd like to say about this or anything else on the posture so far?
About the heart specifically?
Yeah, or anything else. A lot of this is different between genders. And so...
Yeah, so one point about the chest is that, like Jōshin said, we all have different bodies, but we also all have different programming in our bodies based on how we've been holding our posture up until now. And so, like Jōshin said, if we tend to be collapsed, then one way to resolve that is to find a way to lift and put our chest forward without closing the back. Another way is to actually do the opposite. You can actually place a hand over your heart and push your heart back, but without collapsing forward or rounding the shoulders. And so as you push your heart back, it actually opens the energy channels in your back, and so you can gently feel as if your rib cage is spreading away from the sternum, and simultaneously you can gently and subtly feel as if your shoulder blades are spreading away from your spine. And oftentimes, both in the chest and in the back, our muscles tend to be locked and tight and unable to actually do this subtle spreading, and that's perfectly fine. The goal is not to make it happen right away. Instead, just simply by continuously holding an intention to separate your ribs from your sternum and separate your shoulder blades from your spine. And like Jōshin said, you can spend hundreds of hours on this, just holding that intention of opening the chest, opening the back without collapsing or tightening. And eventually, the ribs will indeed subtly open away from the sternum, and the shoulder blades will indeed subtly open away from the spine. And in this way, we cease having pain in our back and shoulders when we sit, and we open the energy channels in our chest and our back in such a way that we can actually feel energy flowing through our bodies. And the way to get there is to start by just simply having that intention, practicing over and over again, and eventually over time we get there.
Thank you. And then the fifth point then is just the top of the spine, back of the head. And this, you just want to be extended or elevated, so it's going up towards the sky. You may have heard the instruction before to imagine there's a piece of string pulling up the back of your head. Like you're sort of, tied around the ceiling and it's pulling you up. This is what that's referring to. Another way I've heard it described as kind of fun is, so what you want to avoid is trying to extend by moving the front of your head up towards the sky, collapsing the back of your neck. That is not extended. Instead of that, you have your spine extended. So the crown of the head, the back of the head is going up towards the sky, and the chin is slightly tucked, so it's not collapsed forward or up and back, but again in that middle location. One way it's been described is as though you take your handlebars sticking on the side of your head, you pull them back in space and turn them a little bit forward. If that works for you, do that. Whatever way it works, just in any case you want to extend the top of your head. Anything on that?
Yeah, so it's important to do this using as little muscle energy as possible, which can be challenging because, again, oftentimes the muscles in our necks are locked up and we'll have to put it into positions that feel awkward or unusual or uncomfortable in order to actually align it. But one way, like Jōshin said, is to cultivate that sense of the head lifting up. Another way is to actually cultivate a sense of the whole rest of your body dropping down away from your head. The collarbone opens, the shoulders relax, as if your head is this floating bubble and the rest of your body is gently melting away from your head. And ultimately, what you want to do, if you're able to feel any direct sensations of chi or energy in your body, is instead of using your muscles to elevate your head, you want to actually allow chi or energy to rise up the back of your neck, and that's ultimately what lifts your head. And the way to do this is by dropping and melting and relaxing chi down your face. And if you're unable to feel a direct sense of chi or energy moving through your body, then one way to do this is just simply cultivate a sense of dropping, melting, relaxing down the face. And in Tai Chi, there's a principle, down causes up, in a similar way as if you put both hands on a waterbed. If you push down with one hand, then your other hand will naturally rise without you needing to do anything to make it rise. In the same way, as we drop energy down the front of our body, energy naturally rises at the back of our body, and we can actually use this to elevate our head. And again, until we're able to have a direct sensation of that energy, you can still be able to move energy, even if you can't feel it, by simply cultivating a sense of dropping, relaxing, melting, almost as if a waterfall is flowing down the front of your body. And as this waterfall flows down the front of your body, steam rises up your spine, gently and subtly lifting the back of your head, creating as little tension as possible. So this is one way that we can do this without actually tightening our bodies and creating more tension.
Wonderful. Thank you. Those are the 5 points of the posture. So, just say to yourself, maybe if you want a mnemonic or something: stable, rooted, centered, open, elevated. And the way that step 1 works is that, and of course you're all invited and welcome to explore that and continue to explore that as I'm talking. Nothing wrong with making that the primary emphasis of your focus. The structure of the method is that those 5 points are used as a mnemonic, as a memory device for everything in step 1. So there are also alignments of the breath and of your state of mind, purifying the hindrances and bringing forth heroic motivations. And we just associate each of those with the points of the posture. It isn't so much that the points of the posture are innately related to the breath or the hindrances or the heroic motivations. It's just a convenient memory device, and it's a nice just way of bringing us again and again into our bodies to help us as Westerners and Homo sapiens to, overcome our tendencies. So, let's do a little bit of practice. Let's do some practice. First, any questions on anything else? Any of what I've been over so far? Anything coming up as you're exploring it? Mm-hmm.
Arms and hands.
Hands?
Hands and arms, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you can just... So there are lots of different ways you can work with them. You don't need to work with them in any particular way. You can, as you have, just put them on your knees. You can, make a mudra in front of you. There's a kind of interlocking hands one is nice. There's this, I think, Shinzen calls it the cosmic Samadhi. Samadhi mudra, you can do that either way. There's plenty, you can do anything you want. Yeah, you can do anything you want. Don't disturb others in the Zen. But good. Anything else on that? Mm-hmm.
So if there is pain in the body, like I experience pain in my ankles, do you have, is that something that might just go away? Do you know?
Yeah, so it's a huge topic. It's one of so pain in meditation is like kind of it's probably what most discussion is about on meditation retreats. Maybe both inner and outer. During Q&A sessions, it's the main topic a lot of the time, and during meditation practice periods, it's the main topic a lot of the time. So know that, first of all, just that there's a pain as part of it a lot of the time, and so you can work with it. There are many different approaches to it. Sometimes the pain does just go away. You sit for a while and it seems more and more painful, but then you're like, oh no, how am I going to do this? But you just kind of keep going, and then you forget about it, and you realize like 10 minutes later that there's no pain. Or the bell rings and you get up and the pain's just completely gone immediately. But it seems like a real problem up until that point. It may be actually worth attending to the sense of being a problem with the pain. So when do I feel like the pain is a problem versus not? For example, typically right before the bell rings, the pain is a really big problem. And the moment that the bell rings, the pain is not a problem. But you haven't changed posture yet. That's kind of weird.
Mm.
So attend to that. Pay attention to that. And then, of course, take care of your body. So if you need to shift posture, try to sit in a different way so that there isn't as much pain. Especially if the pain seems to be indicating damage to your body, that you may be injuring yourself, then definitely shift posture. Nothing wrong with shifting posture. So you can work with it in many ways. Study it, study your reactions to it. Notice when it's more and less. Use it as a meditation object. Pay attention to it in that way. And also just shift posture. It's all good. Anything else on that? Great.
Can I say something on that?
Yeah, sure.
Something that's helpful to know is that one way to determine whether the pain is actually doing damage is if the pain doesn't go away after a few hours, then that's a good sign that it might actually be doing damage, in which case it can be helpful to adjust your cushion or maybe use a chair or sit on your knees or find a way to take care of your body. But oftentimes the pain might be really super intense while we're sitting, but then within 20 minutes it's completely gone, and that's generally a sign that it's not actually harmful.
Great, thank you.